We're live. We're not actually live. We're just alive. And in Patrick's case, barely. After a debaucherous weekend. We have to Patrick was thinking that he was going to rent the library here at the Sea of Tranquility, as I now call the compound, to be quarantined away from all people. And
now the CDC sends me contact tracing forms every morning.
we had a really fun weekend. I mean, I think we're not being, well, yeah, we are being a little bit reckless, I have to confess. But it's funny,
now it's on record.
No, because I do give people a hard time for not wearing masks, not taking COVID seriously. But then, and we do get tested regularly, and yet we're going on with our lives, and we are being social and not hanging out in crowds. But people we like a lot are coming to visit, like Meredith, who is today's guest, Meredith Winner. Tell us what you do real quick, and how you ended up in this den of iniquity.
Oh, well, I ended up here because I met Tal through Bombay Beach, and I am an art producer and curator.
And you're interested specifically in public art, right?
Public art and site-specific art.
And why? What's so great about public art? Why do we want it?
Well, you don't get the opportunity to see really large-scale art all the time, and it's really inspiring to see something that people have made together, and also that's very large. I think that art can really move people just by scale alone.
And so you specifically try and hook up artists who make large scale art with communities and cities and that will be able to exhibit it, right?
Right. So typically the way that the process works is that we get clients that come to us, and then we select the artists for the clients through a selection process, and then we produce the whole sculpture from conception to completion. I think it's eggs to apples.
Oh yeah, soup to nuts. We were looking up what does the expression soup to nuts come from, and it turns out it comes from the beginning of the chorus to the end of the chorus. But there was a Latin version of this same expression, which was from eggs to apples, which is what an ancient Roman meal looked like.
Right, which is much more exciting.
Right?
So we get to do a lot of the boring work, really, is that we are managing the process from making sure the crew is hired to getting insurance for artists, doing the contract work, budgets, transportation, everything that's not creative. Of course, we have a little bit of hand in that too, but making sure everyone's safe and on time.
And how did you get into this line of work? Racket.
Yeah, this racket. My whole life I've been really engrossed in the arts. I think as a little kid I wanted to own an art gallery when they ask you what you want to do when you're 5. And from there I went to art school. I've always worked in the arts, from auction houses and museums and galleries, and I went to Burning Man, which is so cliche, and everyone says that Burning Man changed their life. And I did see one sculpture there one time that was by Marco Cochran, which was the sculpture Truth is Beauty. And I saw it, and I didn't know what else to do other than to find him and to work with him and work with his crew and feel what that felt like to make something that monumental. And I sought him out with a really cheesy...
Do me a favor, just put the mic a little bit more in front of your face.
Yep.
Because you keep moving
okay.
away. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I saw him out on Treasure Island in San Francisco and worked alongside him with his crew, building the next iteration of that series to bring this another monumental sculpture to Burning Man. And from there, worked with other artists to try to get their sculptures placed after festivals or after Burning Man in particular. And that kind of spiraled into starting a company that was focused around helping artists get their work placed or helping artists get new commissions for their work. The namesake of the company is Building 180, which is the name of that workspace on Treasure Island.
Oh, okay, that's very cool. And we've all we haven't talked about Bombay Beach yet on the podcast, but we've all been there and gathered there, and it has become we've talked about focal practices and people and things that gather people in real life. Like technology tends to kind of make it not matter who you are, where you are, when it is, everything is equally available. And I think that there's a sense in the culture of that being, it's obviously great in some sense to be able to listen to any music you want wherever you are, on the train or whatever, but we also long for specific experiences that make the place and the people matter. And I think that and art does that too. It gathers people around it, right? Whether it's a piece of music or a sculpture or a painting, like it makes people pay attention to this specific iteration of something real, right?
Yeah. It's also the freedom to create in a space like that is Bombay Beach without any inhibitions, or you're not making art for someone, you're making it for the people that are coming there and for yourself. So it's not this corporate structure, it's this very free form art for art's sake, as I like to say.
So backing up a little, like for people who don't even know what Bombay Beach is, I think, I also grew up the last 20 years going to Burning Man and watching it go from this really cutting edge, really underground kind of social experiment where people were really thinking this might be a way, to practice for the apocalypse, to it becoming a little bit too big for its own good, I think. And it's still fun, but I think it no longer feels like you're trying you're on the avant-garde of something. And I think that, so we, with all due respect to the inspiration that Burning Man has provided, I think in some ways it seems to have past its heyday, I think. And I think, do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree that there is maybe has been a tipping point, but it is still one of the places that you can dream something to create, and you can still have the ability to do it there. Yeah. Working in public art, there's so much red tape to jump through to get a permit to build a structure, that there's just a blank canvas that you're able to dream something and actually make it, and then you have a community behind you to actually execute it.
Yeah.
And it was good practice for the apocalypse. You learned that we were all dependent on Walmart and China. So how does experiential art deal with the difference between originality and a copy? I've always wondered this. So in what was it? I was in Manhattan and I was there to see Madame X by Sargent at the Met, and I had never seen it in the high art sense. And a friend's mother, when I was explaining this kind of journey, said, "Oh, you haven't seen it yet?" And again, seen it in quotes in the high art sense. And of course, I had seen it.
Seen it in the high art sense?
Well, that literally see the original painting in the museum conditions. Right. But of course, those were not the original museum conditions. Right. And every single piece of, I guess, site-specific or experiential art, if it moves, if it's a new person, it seems in a sense, in almost like a basic philosophical sense, that these are reproductions. These are not the original. And
you mean reproductions in the sense that they're not the actual painting or piece, or that they've moved conditions? Moved conditions.
And that by if you applied the same criteria to a piece of just a visual painting in a place, you might consider the experiential difference to be a copy rather than the quote unquote original. Just kind of is there a concept of original, and is there a concept of a violation by virtue of it being reproduced in the same way for site-specific art?
I think it depends on what the type of art is. So for a painting, I think that you can move a painting and still have the same experience of the artwork, because you get to experience what the color is and the brush strokes, and what the artist, how the artist moved paint around. Where site-specific art is site-specific, so it is very different to translate that experience to a new room or a new space.
So it can be lost forever. So I guess is there a wider tolerance for this adaptation or translation? If it does move, does it matter as much where it is? Is it a new piece of art when it moves sites?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Just feel free to move yourself and the microphone and everything forward so you're not hitting your head on the guitar.
Oh, that's a fair point. Maybe it just reminds me that I have a back of a head.
And also just you're a little too close to the mic because I'm hearing these pops. Yeah, you want to just like back it up a tiny
It's a
bit.
bee in my mouth.
We
What
are-
is the most remote site-specific art?
That I've created, or just generally?
I guess, yeah, both subjective, objective.
Um, wow. I know that there's a lot of like Richard Serra sculptural pieces that are pretty in the countryside, and it's pretty perplexing how you get such massive pieces of steel somewhere. You know, dealing with transportation logistics, you are always thinking about how did someone actually move that thing and get equipment. Even, you know, being here, you know, seeing a boat outside, like how did you get that boat down the road?
With great difficulty.
Yeah, with great difficulty. I can't tell you exactly where that location is, but I know that it would be hard.
You know that they have you guys been to Marfa?
I have not been, but I know of Marfa.
And so Donald Judd, is it one of the founders of minimalism? What I understood when I went to Marfa was that he had looked at a map of the United States that was color coded by population density and found that Marfa was the least populated area in the United States. It's like, you know, in Western Texas. And so he decided as a minimalist that he should go in a place that's the most minimalist place. And so he was able to buy thousands of acres around Marfa and do, you know, these enormous, very minimalist sculptures where, like, you know, it'd be like one cube here and then like hundreds of yards away another one, or miles away even. You drive to the middle of nowhere and there's this there's this Prada store, which is amazing. And I was definitely very inspired both by Marfa and by Burning Man for Bombay Beach, which we still haven't finished explaining, but that's fine. We take detours, is what we do.
Would you
Aren't really
consider
detours. They're the destination.
Would you consider Mecca to be site-specific art?
Mecca near the Salton Sea, or Mecca
No, Mecca, the
Yeah.
the Holy Land. I mean,
there's a little town called Mecca just north of Bombay
well,
Beach.
I'm thinking about this kind of like ritual, not migration, where people travel large distances, sometimes by foot, you know, sometimes over the course of years, to go to a single place to experience a single thing.
I mean, I think that religious artifacts and buildings can certainly be considered art. I think it's maybe more of an architectural piece than it is, you know, quote unquote art. But I think that there's obviously art in architecture too. That probably didn't answer the question.
No, it does. Totally.
Well, I guess it's the pursuit of a certain kind of experience in a way. Like not even the building. I feel like the building itself is almost the ephemeral, or you know, whatever the architecture is. That's not the important part. The important part is the
ritual.
Yeah, but the ritual and like what is meant to happen there.
What do you think is meant to happen there?
I'm not sure. I guess I'm thinking of this. There's a Werner Herzog documentary about some Buddhists. You know, there's one temple and you have to get there at some point. And I think a guy travels for 3 years and he continually gets down on his hands and knees and prostrates himself and touches his forehead and his palms to the ground over the course of this 3-year journey. And it's just to get to this one temple in time.
Is that what happened to your head?
Yeah, that is the. I found myself prostrate at the bottom of a pool, but I'm sure I was aligned. Where does the pool align? The pool points towards what?
It's Mount San Gorgonio, which is the
Yeah.
tallest peak in Southern
Okay,
California.
I was praying to Mount San Gorgonio. And at the end, the guy shows up and he has bone spurs sticking out of his palms and out of his forehead from touching the ground so often, and it just struck me. I mean, the first thing he said was, he was asked, "What do you now know that you didn't know then?" And he said, I now know the size of the earth." And it just struck me that, you know, that was it felt, I read it as the pursuit of an aesthetic experience. I read it as the pursuit of an artistic experience.
I think that, yeah, ritual in that sense, or the journey to get to the end point, is often more important or as important as the final product.
Yeah.
You look so preoccupied.
Well, I'm trying to figure out the definitions of like experience and site specificity. I guess I know I'm being too broad, perhaps.
We wax philosophical here, if you haven't noticed.
It's okay.
We like pretension.
So there's in Argentina, there's a spot where 7 killer whales in the entire world know, the 7 and only 7, they know they can come up on the beach and they eat a seal and they wiggle back into the water. and they do it one time per year, like around like February, March, April, and it's like it's site specific. In all of the oceans, these whales migrate all around the world. They go to the Mediterranean, they go to Alaska, they go all around. They follow coastlines, they follow the food, and there's just one spot in the world that they know that like the conditions are correct for them to be able to breach onto the beach, grab a seal, and we go back into the water. And I've always loved site specificity for natural phenomena. Mm-hmm. I've loved that more than anything. Like I love it when there's only one spot in the world you can find a thing or see a thing. And I'm just trying to consider, like, you know, does religious belief count as a kind of natural, witnessing a natural event? I'm not saying those are art or those are installations in any sense. I'm wondering at the shared pursuit of these kinds of site specificity and whether or not there's something in common between those naturalists who go to one spot to look at a thing and those who make site specific art.
I mean, I think that you can't recreate a space, as you were saying before. Like, you can't move a site-specific piece of art in the same way you can't move the whales to go to a different spot to do their seal work or seal eating.
Seal art.
Seal art. So I think that the site is super important, and I think that if you're, as an artist, if you pick a site and then you're going through the design process of what would go in that site, it would be different from place to place. It's not like, oh, I'm going to make this thing here. It's that I'm going to make this thing here.
I think also going back to Heidegger, he wrote a great essay called The Origin of the Work of Art, and he says the purpose of art is not to represent something, but it's to give things their look and men their outlook on themselves. So the idea is that the artist is the job of the artist is to hold up what it means to be a thing and what it means to be a human at that specific time and place. Mm-hmm. And when we look back at art, the art is kind of powerful enough to span an entire epoch of what it is to be human, in which case the art still works. For example, I think if you go into a cathedral in Rome, it's still working. You still have Catholics all over the world who come to this place and they see what it is to be human when they look at the frescoes on the ceilings of the Sistine Chapel or whatever it is, right? And then they come to this communion with. So then Heidegger would say that God is still living in those churches, right? But maybe we go to the ancient Greek temple of Paestum or something, and that artwork has died. And we see it maybe more as an aesthetic experience, or we marvel at, or we get some access to what it was like to be human at that time, but only insofar as we might have some shared practices with them. You could imagine an artwork so distant from us that it would just be a curiosity, right? Rather than like holding up something meaningful for us. But I think that what we're trying to do now with these site-specific things, whether it's a Burning Man experience or a Bombay Beach experience, is to make art by and for the people who are experiencing it. And I think that's a very different pursuit than going to a museum and experiencing, art from a bygone era.
And you gave the kind of psychological motivation about Marfa, but so you co-run this festival, right, in Bombay Beach. What was the kind of psychological motivation for Bombay Beach before? Like, how did you kind of select it? How did you?
So I think that Southern California, especially, has very little. We didn't have our own. Burning Man is very much a Northern California thing, right? It belongs very much to the people of the Bay Area, and we had Coachella, which is just the archetypal corporate mass-produced event that's all about money, all about all the things that art, I think, that take away from art being meaningful. And every time I'd been to Coachella, it also just is very distracting because there's like all these different stages. So every time you're at one stage, you're wondering if you should be at another stage and what you're missing, and then you want to go see what friends you're going to bump into. And it was just the manifestation of everything wrong with Southern California for me. And so I always thought it would be great to have something that's a little more organic, a little more grassroots, a little bit more real, and a little bit more affecting, where art can actually affect change in a community. And I fell in love with the Salton Sea when I first went in 2008, I saw a book about it in a bookstore. I was just perusing, and I see this like crumbling trailer in this old airstream, like kind of decomposing in this very toxic body of liquid that looked kind of like impossibly pink. And I was like, what's this? And then it's like, oh, Salton Sea, largest body of water in California. And I was like, how have I never heard of this? And then it turns out that nobody's ever heard of it, even people who've lived in LA most of their lives, like me, like it's 3 hours away. There's this giant body of water. And it was like Americana gone wrong. You know, like Palm Springs has, you know, Modernism Week, all the celebration of modern architecture and design and art, and we ended up doing Postmodernism Week in Bombay Beach because it was just like the other side of that dream, and what happens when the hubris of American kind of expansionism goes wrong was what I learned happened in the Salton Sea, and it was just the ultimate in kind of misguided optimism and arrogance. What happened was, briefly, people can look up more, but otherwise I'd spend the whole hour talking about this. But they, in 1905, they were damming the Colorado River to bring water down to Southern California. You know, most of our water comes from the Colorado River. None of the Colorado River ends up in the sea. But there was a breach in the dam, and suddenly the entire contents of the Colorado River were flowing uncontrollably into this low salt desert basin. It was called the Salton Basin. And it became, over the next 3 years, the largest body of water in California. And it made no sense. It was a giant puddle in the middle of the desert with no flow and no circulation. But a lot of people said, wow, look, we could have Palm Springs with water. Can you imagine? Like, how great. Let's put fish in this thing, and let's build little towns around it, and let's just have this amazing juxtaposition of desert and water. And so all these towns got built around the Salton Sea, and then you know, what could possibly go wrong? They had to keep the water from evaporating, so that there was like all this agriculture around there that's being fed by the Colorado River. So they said, we'll just use the runoff from the agriculture to keep the sea full. And I think 1 million acre feet a year get put into the Salton Sea. But there's like salt at the bottom, and again, no outlet. So the water that was fresh was getting saltier and saltier and saltier. And somehow miraculously, these really tough, poor fish, the corvina and the tilapia they put in there, went from being freshwater fish to surviving in water that's twice as saline as the ocean. I think it's the only time this has ever happened in the history of fish. So the fish started dying, and you started getting, from the heat and the algae that was growing and the lack of oxygen and the salt, you started getting these massive fish die-offs. In the 90s, sometimes there would be like 9 million fish dying in a single day. But they were also reproducing at these alarming rates. So you just get more and more, because the water became very, very rich with nutrients, with all of this, all of these dead fish and all these algae and all this other stuff growing in there. So it started to smell really, really bad, and people just started to just run away, right? Because you couldn't even be there anymore. And that's when I started like going there. I get in my car and I drive around, and on the distant shore, the farthest shore from Los Angeles, is you drive, and suddenly there's like 25 miles with absolutely nothing. And all of a sudden you see a sign that says Bombay Beach, 8 miles. Bombay Beach, what's this? And you pull up, and suddenly there's this perfect little square grid of a town with the streets like as if you're in New York City, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And it wasn't totally a ghost town. There was still like 200 people living there, but there could have been like 2,000 people living there. So like 90% of the town is abandoned, with like these old trailers, rotting away. And then there's these like 200 eccentric people living there. And I was just immediately enthralled with this place. And I said to my then wife, like, let's buy a house in Bombay Beach. And she said, are you fucking crazy? Why would we buy a house in that hellhole? And it's also, you have to imagine, it's like 120 degrees in the summer.
Well, but so unpack that moment. Why, like, her response was the more natural and normal response.
Yes.
Like, why? would we? But so what was happening in your mind that made you excited about wanting to buy a house in this kind of desolate ghost town on a toxic body of water?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to our conversation about specificity. Like if you travel across America, most towns all look the same. You exit any freeway exit anywhere in the country and you'll know exactly what you're going to see. A Chevron station, a Denny's, you'll know exactly what to expect, and there'll be like a parking lot. The beauty of this place to me as an artist, and I think to now the people who have started coming there, is that it's different from everything else. And it's all these kind of homogenizing, banalizing forces, like corporate forces, have no interest in being there. So you don't see a billboard, you don't see a Denny's, you don't see a gas station. People go around in golf carts because there's no, and we so crave specificity as a culture that people will go to this place that is otherwise hell on earth just to have that specificity, And I think that's what I was amazed that this hadn't happened already, that there weren't a bunch of artists there already. I think a lot of people were going there and shooting music videos and shooting fashion things, but then they were afraid to stay, and there was nowhere to stay. So people wouldn't spend the night, and people thought like, oh, it's just like a bunch of meth heads and we're going to get killed or something like that. But as I went there more and more, I realized that it wasn't dangerous. It was just, it's sad and poor and has a lot of issues. It's basically a catastrophe on every level, environmentally, socially, economically, historically, in every architecturally. It's just a disaster, but disasters are compelling, right? Like I think we visit ruins for reasons that, anyway, so I started bringing my friend Mark Rathall, who's a philosophy professor at Oxford now. And I started saying to him, well, what would it take to do a philosophy conference here? And he looked at me like I was crazy, but was also kind of intrigued. And he said, well, just call some philosophers and tell them to come. They love to talk. And so that idea was planted. And then I went to Burning Man, and my friend Stefan Ashkenazi, who've been friends since the 7th grade, and he's a hotelier and experience creator. And he did this Burning Man camp, which was just absolutely amazing. There was like, on the 5th night, when everybody else is reduced to eating like, cold canned SpaghettiOs and kind of scraping around, he decides to have like a black tie dinner for 100 people. And Susan Sarandon was there, and there was like dwarves with
That's not the word I expected you to say.
It's not
No. That's I just mean that's not the word I expected you to say.
Is that the incorrect word to use?
I mean just quite literally.
No.
I'm not talking PC world. I just mean that's not the image I expected.
With giant silver platters of a whole roasted pigs and magic mushrooms and then Susan Sarandon had brought like a vial of Timothy Leary's ashes, which they then sprinkled in everyone's cocktails. So we engaged in, I called it an act of psychedelic necrophilia cannibalism by drinking a little sprinkle of Timothy Leary's ashes. Anyway, so when I saw Stefan there and was so blown away by what he had created here at Burning Man, I started telling him about Bombay Beach. And it turns out that unbeknownst to me, he was also thinking it would be great to do an art site-specific event in Southern California, and his girlfriend had been telling him about Bombay Beach, and so we were able to drag him down there because he's like, I heard it was hell there. Why would I want to go there? Why do I want to go to a smelly hot place like this beautiful high desert in Joshua Tree? Like, let's do it there, right? And then he had this great line. He said, slowly after I went to Bombay Beach, we shifted our focus from communing with nature to commiserating with it. And anyway, that's how he and I and Lily Johnson White decided to create Bombay Beach. Sorry, I could talk about this for an hour.
I have three rapid fire questions for you.
Yes.
You've been there.
Yes.
Bombay Beach. Okay. So first question: when does the site start? Does it start when you get in your car and start driving towards it? Does it start when you look it up on Google Maps? Does it start when you look at the Wikipedia page? Does it start when you wake up in the morning and start driving? 2, what was your first impression of actually showing up there? Like, Tao can cover his ears. 3, how do you deal with site specificity when there's people already on the site? The 200 people live there already, right? But this probably comes up over and over.
I think the experience of, what you're saying about going to Mecca is part of the journey too. So you're like, I'm going to Bombay Beach, and driving through the desert is an experience in itself. So I do think it starts when you're getting there, and the excitement starts to build when you're going. I don't think that you would necessarily know what to expect the first time you're going there, because it's just a strange place, as Tao was saying. What was the second question?
What was your first impression when you showed up?
The first impression is just that it's this very bizarre landscape, and you're kind of looking around to suss out where you are, because it isn't like any place that you've been before. There isn't a Chevron station, and there's not a Denny's, and there are all of these characters walking around in a really cool bar called the Ski Inn, and these very eccentric and unique people, and kind of bombed out trailers, for lack of a better word.
The Ski Inn, it makes no sense. Like the Airbnb algorithm asks me if my place in Bombay Beach is ski in and ski out, and I said yes, because I guess they just look at the word ski near there.
Yeah.
People used to water ski in the sea. That's where it comes from. But it's also the lowest bar in the Western Hemisphere, supposedly.
And it's great. I guess you're just a little overwhelmed by what happened, and very intrigued by what happened and what is happening now. And third question?
How do you deal with site specificity when there's people already on the site?
I think that you have to be aware of who's there, and also not try to have a, savior complex of I'm going to fix this place, or I'm going to make it better. I think that there is value in revitalizing a place, but doing it within the community that already exists there, and having them be a part of the process. It doesn't have to be completely a democratic process, but it's still allowing people to be involved if they want to be, or opening the doors for them to be involved. I think that otherwise it just is that, we know better than these people that are already there, and it's kind of a rude sentiment.
It is a lot of politics around gentrification and stuff. I mean, I always thought there's no way Bombay Beach could ever gentrify. It would be like in a race with like Port-au-Prince in Haiti, for which would gentrify quicker, because it was so far gone. And the idea of anyone even wanting to be there was so amazing. I mean, you have to imagine there's like, I think I counted 1,050 lots in Bombay Beach, and I think probably 800 of those are just abandoned.
Right.
And you literally could not give land away there. Like you couldn't, like people would put their lots on the market for $500 and no one would buy them. Like I literally bought a few lots there, one with a Spartan trailer abandoned on it for $800, and the Spartan is worth 10 times that at least. So you couldn't get, you had to drag people there, and then now you have some very sanctimonious people like getting upset about gentrification. There's one guy specifically, and he's been there like 3 years. I've been there 12 years now. And he's, saying, these, fucking artists coming here and like, but I think there's a lot of, we live in a time of a lot of polarization, a lot of people getting upset about things. And I think we have to, the good news is we do have to like deal with that. And I think one of the issues with Burning Man, and the New York Times, when it wrote about the Bombay Beach Biennale the first year, they called it the anti-Burning Man. And this is, again, with tremendous respect for Burning Man. We've had several of the founders of Burning Man come to Bombay Beach. We love them. They love us. But there is something essential to Burning Man, which is the fact that it's A, in a place where there are no people, and B, that it's absolutely temporary. It's like, it's a giant mandala, basically. They're creating something for it to disappear. Their whole motto is leave no trace. We are dealing with a place that is full of people, and we are very much trying to leave a trace. We want, if we have any rules for the artists, it's like create something that's going to be permanent,
right, insofar
as permanence exists. Obviously, we know that everything is ephemeral and everything is, going towards heat death. But like we want to try and create a little bit of staying power where it's cumulative. So each year, as more art is created, the town becomes a place where people have, there's some identity around this.
And people go
And most people do love what we're doing, just for the record.
right. And people do go and gawk, and I think that can be disruptive to a place too. That once you quote unquote revitalize a place or bring art there, obviously people want to go and see the art, which can be disruptive. But it also, like you're saying, leaves something better behind, hopefully. And I think it also gives the opportunity for the residents that live in that space, whether it's Bombay Beach or if you're doing art in other communities, that they may have not had the opportunity to see that type of art otherwise. Yeah. So, and I think that, going back to the beginning, that art has this power to change people and really impact their lives in a meaningful way. And the people in Bombay Beach, and of course, I'm not speaking for everyone there, but may not have been able to see the types of art that you've brought there, or that the people have brought there.
I mean, it's also a very fine line of safety versus provocation, right? Like, I imagine placing public art, this must always be an issue. If you make something super vanilla that everybody likes, it's probably going to be meaningless. And if you try and say something, you're going to say something that's going to annoy some people, right? I mean, I remember one of my favorite documentaries about any artist is about Francis Bacon. And he says this great line, they're asking about the people who really hate his work and the violence in it and the kind of potential ugliness that people can see in it. And he said, well, I can think of no greater condemnation of my work than everybody liking it. So I imagine, can you talk a little bit about like how you deal with that, like meaning versus like safety when you're trying to like place public work and everyone's sensibilities? Well,
and that's one of the very big difficulties with public art, is that you typically have to go through a permitting process where you have to present the work to a committee of people. And I think more often than not, it does end up being a little vanilla because of that bureaucracy. In places like, when you have the freedom to create, when you have a blank canvas like Burning Man or like Bombay Beach, you can do a little bit more politicized work. But public art's hard to do that with, frankly.
Yeah. No, and we're in a very unique situation. On the one hand, we're not commercializing anything. Nothing. This is again like inspired by Burning Man. There's nothing for sale in Bombay Beach. There's no tickets sold for the we don't even want to call it a festival. For the thing.
The other thing in the desert. Yeah.
So there's no tickets. There's nothing for sale. The art is absolutely not commercial, which I think allows a great freedom of expression. But there's also the issue of that we're creating on private property, and people now are kind of competing for buying these lots. And there's a little bit of a, kind of underground race, which an artist named James Oster, who created the Opera House, had this brilliant idea, which we now just manifested, which was, he said, it's become a bit like Monopoly. And, Bombay Beach is a perfect square. And if you look at it from above, it looks a bit like a Monopoly board. And so he said we should make like a giant Monopoly board piece. So I found the lot that would be Park Place, one of the most valuable Monopoly board pieces. And then I found the owner, and he liked the idea. So he leased me the lot for $1 a year for 15 years. And we put some money in, me and the owner, to build this giant Monopoly board piece, which is a really cheeky art piece now by David Corcoran, who's another artist who's been involved since the beginning in Bombay Beach. And it's a giant thing. You can probably see it from space now. I'm excited for Google Maps to and it's got a little red hotel. And then I want to put little games inside there so kids can go in and play Monopoly and Scrabble. But so the issue of gentrification, real estate, art, that uncomfortable place where art meets commerce, which is most art is very commercial, right? And
there is a loophole with the private property, as you said too. So you can create public art without the bureaucracy of getting a permit.
Exactly.
We've been in San Francisco in the wake of COVID doing the same thing by painting murals, or hiring artists to paint murals on boarded storefronts, which typically you would have to go through the Arts Commission to get approval to do that. But because it's on privately owned businesses, we've been able to do 100 murals in the Bay Area in the past few months.
Wow. What's that project called?
Paint the Void.
Paint the Void. Amazing.
If you could move heaven and earth, and you had the voluntary equivalent of the Egyptian laborers to build the pyramids, what would you do?
Put art everywhere.
Not just one thing. Not you, like one vision of a thing you most would do, like LHC CERN style, like large project, like the site that is. What site do you daydream about putting art in?
Oh, that's a really hard question. Like the actual site.
Like the bottom of the ocean, or a insulating sphere inside a volcano. I don't know, something.
Probably just
or Marfa 2.0.
Yeah. I don't know about the specific spot in general, but I think it would be somewhere really remote because, again, it is part of the journey to get to that spot. And when you stumble upon something really unexpected, it creates this really beautiful experience.
What about you, Patrick? You seem like you've thought about this.
Kind of like the idea of taking someone's ashes and feeding them to a fish, and then feeding that fish to a whale, which is GPS tagged, and then being able to the site specific art is you have to find the whale in the ocean.
I like that.
I've heard that's really hard. I was listening to a podcast about whale watchers, and like finding a whale in the ocean is impossible.
But it's that kind of pursuit. Okay, it's 25 miles to drive into Bombay Beach, but it's thousands of miles to find the whale. I mean, go Moby Dick style.
We almost got a giant whale.
Yeah.
Thanks to Meredith. Like there was a whale that needed to be moved that was 80 feet long, made out of like recycled trash, right?
Yeah, it was made by Joel, Dean Stockdale, and Justina Salnikova, and it was made of 5,000 pounds of hand recycled plastic.
Like a real whale.
Like a real whale. Yeah. The commentary being that every 9 minutes the weight of a blue whale is dumped into the ocean.
Wow. And so, yeah, we really wanted this in Bombay Beach. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But I do hope that you're able to bring some massive piece of art to Bombay Beach soon.
We will be able to.
And what if people want to find out about your murals and more of the work that you guys do? Where would they look online for this?
Paintthevoid.org is the organization for the mural painting, and building180.com is my organization.
And you have a partner in it, right?
Yes, Shannon Riley. She's the best.
and you guys recently came to Bombay Beach and also just painted and gutted out an abandoned trailer that it was returning into another gallery space. So that was wonderful. I look forward to seeing how that evolves. I also think, Bombay Beach has become a destination for people to come and see very site-specific art. There's probably now like 50 permanent pieces there around town. So I do suggest that people go and visit, especially if you're in Southern California. It's become a thing, for better or worse, mostly better, I think. And also Patrick has been to the last two talking about brains. We haven't talked about that at all, but there's a philosophy conference that has also turned into a science conference. And it's just been, my motto for Bombay Beach, and I translate it into Latin and I don't remember how to say it now, but it's the less sense it makes, the more sense it makes. So the idea is that we can play with that unexpected juxtaposition of, opera in this decrepit little town, or highfalutin, pretentious, but meaning-filled philosophy conference. And Patrick has come with his human brain that he travels around with and given a talk. No. Should I not be talking about that?
You mean this one?
Yes.
The one encased in my skull.
Of course, just that one. Is it really so controversial that we're not supposed to talk about it?
The existence of my perfectly functional organic brain?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's because, brains are supposed to, be invisible. They sit, I don't even know how heavy, your own brain is. It doesn't feel pain or anything.
Anyway, he's got a really nice brain that he talks with. With all the ambiguity that statement comes with.
I figured out what I would do. The site-specific art, if I could move heaven and earth. There are these asteroids that come from behind the sun, and they're kind of hidden. They're surprising, right? Because we have to use optics to see. We have to see them. We can't see them if they're behind the sun. And so there's a few that get gravitationally slung, and those are the surprising ones that no matter how good you are, you don't see them. And sometimes they're hurtling directly at Earth. And I think what I would do is I would start an auction for all of the major oil companies or just large companies, and I would make them pay for me not to put their sign on the asteroid as it hurtles towards Earth.
I love it.
All right.
Okay, well, I think we can wrap it up for today. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Anything else? No. Enough. Let's continue to
tomorrow.
convalesce.
We have
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go.